Hello, you've selected Goodwill Industries of the Inland Northwest Sexual Harassment and Discrimination Annual Employee Training and Awareness. Please follow along through the slides. Make sure that you write down any questions that arise during the training so you can ask your supervisor or the HR department for clarification. Also, after the training, you'll be required to either communicate to your supervisor that you finished, or if you have access to an email account through Goodwill, you'll be required to email your supervisor and the HR department, preferably the HR manager. After you've informed us that you've completed the training and you don't have any questions, you'll receive an acknowledgement to sign. That acknowledgement will be sent to the Human Resource Department for your personnel file. This is the annual mandatory training. Also, all of our policies are located on Goodwill's Internet SharePoint site. If you have access to a computer, you can view those. If not, but you would like to view them, please communicate this to your supervisor. Right, the purpose here today is to answer a few questions. We want to talk about what is sexual harassment, discrimination, and workplace harassment. If you become aware of a situation involving this, where you are being harassed or discriminated against, what do you do? And also Goodwill's policy on these topics. So here at Goodwill, we have a zero tolerance when it comes to sexual harassment, discrimination, or workplace harassment. So sexual harassment is anything that is an unwelcome, offensive conduct of a sexual nature that makes someone uncomfortable or him or her embarrassed. Now, oftentimes we think this is male to female, but it can also be female to male, can include same gender, and can also include our customers, vendors, or visitors. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, their guidelines define sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, or other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitutes sexual harassment. Throughout this training, you'll see the word unwelcome. So sexual advance, requests for sexual favors, or sexually verbal or physical conduct must be unwelcome. The courts are not going to look at the individual's intent. The courts are going to look at two things. They're going to look at the alleged victim's perception and the sexual action that did occur. As a Goodwill employee, the best course of action is to assume that any sexual conduct is taboo. If you have to ask yourself, it probably is. So offensive behavior could be verbal, nonverbal, and/or it could be physical. The next few slides will delve into these three topics. So verbal, it could be telling sexual stories or jokes, using four-letter obscenities, using terms such as sweetie, doll, babe, cutie, dearie, or baby, making suggestive comments or innuendos about a person's body or his or her appearance, probing into a person's sexual experience or his or her preferences, insisting on dates, or making suggestive sounds or whistling at a person. The second bullet point here, using four-letter obscenities. Now, if you just swear once, you will not be, more than likely won't be in violation of our sexual harassment or discrimination or harassment policy. However, we do have a work rule against using four-letter obscenities. So make sure that you refrain from using these at work. We understand that every once in a while one may slip, and more than likely that will be addressed as a work rule violation. However, if it is severe and pervasive, you may be wading into sexual harassment, discrimination, or harassment guidelines, so be very careful. Also, insisting on dates, the second from the last bullet point. Here at Goodwill, we don't have a policy when it comes to dating other employees. The accounting department, the IT department, and the human resource department may not date anyone that works at Goodwill. However, two cashiers can date each other, or a facility associate and a cashier could date each other. So if you are on the org chart and the same level as another employee, we have no policy stating that you cannot date. However, if you're a supervisor level, you cannot date a subordinate employee. Some of the nonverbals could be leering and oogling suggestively, following a person or blocking his or her way, showing sexually explicit pictures, cartoons, or other visuals, making suggestive sounds or body movements, sending unwanted notes or other unwanted written material, and giving unwanted personal gifts. Now the third bullet here, showing sexually explicit pictures, cartoons, or other visuals, is on the rise. Today, a lot of people have smartphones. What comes with these smartphones is access to the internet and access to inappropriate text messages, pictures. So please make sure that you leave your cell phone either at home, in your purse, or in your locker. And when you are using these, you're on break. Also be aware of other people that are around you when you are accessing your cell phone. If somebody else sees a picture that's on your phone, you could potentially also be in violation of this policy. The last two, sending unwanted notes or written material, or giving unwanted personal gifts. Here in this particular department, we celebrate people's birthdays, so we often get birthday cards and sometimes gifts for those individuals. If these are unwanted materials, please refrain from doing that. However, again, it needs to be unwanted. Some of the physical. This could be touching a person's clothing or his or her hair, massaging a person's neck or his or her shoulders, kissing, caressing, or pinching an individual, leaning over, standing too close, brushing up against a person, or invading his or her personal space. Let's see. Starting with standing too close or brushing up against a person. We understand in particular the production area, some of you have to work in close proximity, and we understand sometimes you may potentially brush up against a person or have to stand close for certain procedures that may happen. However, please be aware of other people's personal spaces, which leads into invading their space. Everyone has a bubble. Please be aware that you're not inside somebody's personal space. If somebody has their arms crossed or they're backing away, please watch your body language and make sure that you're giving them space and that you're not invading their personal bubble. So unwelcome behavior. You need to ask yourself, would you like it if a member of your family was being treated this way? Could your behavior offend someone or hurt somebody? As adults, we're all responsible for our actions and our behaviors and the consequences that go along with that. Here at Goodwill, we have a responsibility to treat everybody with respect. Make sure that you also assert your rights to a respectful work environment. Sexual harassment is not a matter of intent, it's a matter of perception. A few slides back, I said the courts are not going to look at what you intended to do. They're going to, what you intended to do, they're going to look at the alleged person's perception of what they think did or perceived to have happened. This is a very important slide. I have a few slides. The next few ones are going to be regarding perception. People see things differently. So in this particular one, on one end you may see the individual spinning clockwise, and on the other end you may see the individual spinning counterclockwise. If you see it in one direction, see if you can stop it and make it spin in the other direction. I'll leave it up for just a few moments. Alright, how about in this particular picture? Can you find the hidden tiger? If you look closely, written on the tiger's, you can see the, on his neck, hidden in the center of his body, and down his leg, the word tiger. How about in this particular picture? How many faces can you count? I could not count 13, but according to the site that I got this off, there are 13 faces in this particular picture. How about in this photo or picture? Are there faces or homes in the background? How about in this one? Which word do you see located on this slide? On the black writing, you can see the word good, and inside the word, written in white, you can see the word evil. Now this is a chalk drawing. This is a flat surface that an individual used chalk to draw. This particular individual travels around the country and competes in chalk drawings, and he's actually the one that has won it the last several years. Alright, I know it when I see it. Sexual harassment is the most difficult type of situation to decipher and to deal with. If you have to ask yourself, it probably is. Now there's two types of sexual harassment that are legally recognized in court, and that is quid pro quo sexual harassment and hostile environment sexual harassment. Now with quid pro quo, this means in exchange for something else, this for that. Now this is the most obvious and direct type of sexual harassment. This is the one that we often see in movies and TV shows. And this occurs when some kind of job penalty or benefit is given someone either on their acceptance or rejection of a request for sexual favors. And this is barring proof that the conduct was not unwelcome, and there's no defenses in a court of law for quid pro quo sexual harassment. The second one is hostile environment. This is where there are regular and repeated unwelcome and offensive sexual comments, innuendos, jokes, inappropriate touching, or other degrading or abusive conduct of a sexual nature. Now, in a hostile work environment, the average person or the reasonable person would find the situation intolerable. It also needs to be severe and pervasive, and it is very difficult to identify. However, it does happen, and it is just important to investigate. In addition to that, non-employee sexual harassment happens as well. This is when you are being harassed by a customer, client, vendor, or someone else who is not an employee of Goodwill. We also have a zero tolerance for this type of conduct towards our employees. We'll either stop doing business with a particular vendor, or we'll tell the customer that he or she is no longer welcome in our facility. Also, sexual harassment can happen between two people of the same sex. It's just as offensive and inappropriate as opposite sex harassment. Remember, it's not all about men harassing women. Goodwill's very proud of our diversity. Here in the Pacific Northwest, you don't find that very often. So any remarks that are gender specific, derogatory, or stereotypical are not going to be tolerated. Remember, most of us work side by side. We all have different abilities. We have different national origins, religions, abilities, ages, different races. And usually we work together. We don't have any problems. However, we know that sometimes problems do arise. And as Goodwill and as a supervisor, these issues need to be addressed. Remember that discrimination takes many different types of forms. So harassment, this means to trouble, worry, or torment someone on a persistent basis. I've listed a few examples here on the slide. One example is an employee repeatedly addresses a coworker with a derogatory comment or stereotype, such as an employee calls a coworker wearing a turban or a Hispanic coworker a derogatory name. Another example may be an employee tries to get a coworker to resign by spreading untrue, malicious gossip about a coworker because of his or her disability. Now, discrimination, this occurs when a person or group of people are treated differently from another person or group of people. This could be because of his or her race or color, gender, veteran status, religious belief, pregnancy, disability, marital status, sexual orientation, national origin, age, or his or her genetic information. A few examples would be a supervisor refusing to hire a well-qualified candidate because she is pregnant, or persistently commenting or kidding about a coworker's ancestry even after you've been asked to stop. So make sure that you respect the people around you. Make sure that you think before you act. Imagine how other people might be feeling. Always exercise common courtesy, and make sure that you think twice about making a joke. If you have to ask yourself if it's appropriate, more than likely it is not. Again, before you speak, ask yourself if what you're going to say is true, helpful, inspiring, necessary, or kind. If the answer to any of these is no, maybe what you're about to say should be left unsaid. Always treat your coworkers with respect, dignity, and professionalism. We need to be right to the sensitive of others, and here at Goodwill, we will deal with inappropriate conduct properly and appropriately. So if you find yourself in a situation where you're being harassed and you're comfortable, please tell the harasser that the behavior is unwelcome and you would like it to stop. Also use the chain of contact. Report it immediately to your supervisor. You may also report it to your department director and or the human resource department. If the report is against your direct supervisor, please report this to your department director and/or the Human Resource Department. If you're not comfortable telling the person, just go forward and use the chain of contact. Either the Human Resource Department, the department director, or the supervisor will address this with the individual. So please be aware of the process. There are several important factors. Confidentiality is guaranteed to the greatest extent possible. This means that only people that need to know will know. However, we will have to interview some people, potential witnesses, and we'll also have to talk to the individual who is being accused. Also, Goodwill has a zero tolerance against any form of retaliation. If you report something and the individual retaliates, that will be dealt with promptly as well and appropriately. And be assured that we are taking the situation seriously. The information is going to be relayed immediately to the people that need to know, and that you will be contacted as soon as possible. Again, any form of retaliation is against Goodwill policy, is strictly prohibited, and is not going to be tolerated. In addition to that, after thorough investigation, an individual found to have made false claims with the purposeful intent to discredit or harm will be subject to disciplinary action at the appropriate level. Goodwill Industries strives to maintain a healthy and productive work environment built on mutual respect and trust. Sexual harassment, discrimination, and workplace harassment is behavior that Goodwill is not going to tolerate. So what is Goodwill's policy on sexual harassment in 5 words or less? Goodwill's policy is zero tolerance. Also remember, sexual harassment is unfair, it's unwelcome, unwanted, unacceptable, and unlawful. Let's go through some scenarios. Hannah repeatedly asks Derek for a date. He refuses each time and tells her that he has a girlfriend, yet she persists. He clearly indicates that he is not interested. Come on, continues Hannah, are you saying I have absolutely no chance? I'd say there's a 99.999% chance that you and I will ever get together, he says. So there's still a chance, she announces. Is this sexual harassment? Is this situation different if Hannah is a supervisor? Why or why not? Although harassment frequently involves power relationships, sexual harassment may occur between any coworkers and may not necessarily affect a reporting relationship. David's no answers indicate that the advances are unwelcome. Hannah must leave him alone. Furthermore, if Hannah were his supervisor, she should understand that it is difficult for a subordinate employee to say no. Therefore, her advances are potentially more threatening. Whether she is a coworker or supervisor, the issue is really not the number of times she's asked for a date. The more pertinent issue involves whether the recipient welcomes the advances. Scenario 2. David's shift supervisor, Chuck Wilcox, congratulates a coworker on her outstanding work performance during a busy Saturday as a DSA. He pats her on the back and compliments her on her physical strength. He also compliments her on her appearance. You've got to be the most attractive and athletic DSA I've had the privilege of meeting, he says. Is this an example of sexual harassment? And is all touching off limits? This is sometimes a tough call. A pat on the back may not be intended as a sexual advance, yet may be unwanted by the recipient. In this time of litigation, some managers are choosing a hands-off approach and are congratulating an employee by verbal means. A supervisor who massages the shoulders of a subordinate is definitely asking for trouble. This may also offend someone else and could be considered sexual harassment. Now, regarding his statement, these are too personal. Statements like, I like your dress, and by the way, your legs look great, or you look great today, or I watched you as you walked away, are much too personal for many people. Comments that are usually acceptable are, you look very professional, and you look nice today. It's true that most touching is off limits. Scenario 3. Jesus and Tyrone both are DSA employees. Jesus is Hispanic, and Tyrone is African American. Jesus and Tyrone like to joke around with each other to pass the time and throw racial slurs back and forth. Neither of these employees are offended by these racial slurs. What could be potential problems in this scenario? Customers or other employees, or just people walking by, may be offended by the behavior. Others may not welcome hearing such remarks, nor think it is appropriate at work or otherwise. Most workplaces do have policies stating that racial slurs have no place in the environment. Scenario 4. Scott sends Rebecca, a female coworker, an email from his vacation spot on a beach to her private residence. He sends her a picture of himself in a Speedo and an X-rated story that he wrote. He wants to know if she enjoyed the picture and the story. She indicates that the picture and the story were offensive and asks him not to send emails to her house. Scott suspects that Rebecca is a lesbian. Is this an example of sexual harassment? Why or why not? Sexual harassment can occur anywhere, but must have a negative impact on the work environment. This could be an example of sexual harassment if his unwanted advances continue in the workplace, or if his outside advances are so severe as to have a negative impact on the recipient's work environment, even though the incident took place outside the walls of the workplace. If the behavior affects a work relationship or work environment, it is usually considered sexual harassment. In addition, a person's sexual orientation is a taboo topic in a work environment. Scenario 5. Suzanne and Harry enjoy a great working relationship and just recently have started dating. They can't seem to get enough of each other. They take breaks and lunches together and are often seen flirting at the coffee machine. They are clearly infatuated with each other. Romance has no place at work. This couple's behavior is clearly at risk for sexual harassment. Do you believe this is true or false, and why? Laws on sexual harassment refer to only non-consensual behavior of a sexual nature or related to sex. This means that at least one of the parties is not willing, does not consent, and does not find the behavior welcome. Susanna and Harry have a consensual relationship, so their behavior may not be construed as sexual harassment. However, romances may go sour and lead to sexual harassment situations. That's why some organizations have made policies regarding office romance. In addition, coworkers may be offended by the behavior, and it may give rise to a sexual harassment claim. Scenario 6. Tim and Katie, advertising sales executives, travel together on a week-long business trip. In the taxi ride from the airport to the hotel, Tim snuggles up to Katie and tries to hold her hand. Katie strongly objects and Tim backs off. While Katie finds Tim's behavior offensive and unwelcome, the regulations regarding sexual harassment in the workplace are not relevant, since they were not at their usual workplace when the incident happened. Work premises and at work-related sites, including business trip locations, conventions, and holiday office parties. Scenario 7. You're a 22-year-old male employee whose manager is twice as old. Miss Temptation has indicated to you that she wants a sexual relationship with you. Being a respectable young man, you refuse her advances. She fabricates a story, and she recommends your dismissal. Do you tell Human Resources that this manager was in fact making advances to you and the stories were in fact contrived because you refused to bow to her request? Would you fight for your right, or would the fear of embarrassment drive you away from the job? And what type of sexual harassment is this? This is a clear example of the type of behavior most people recognize as sexual harassment. It represents the type of sexual harassment called quid pro quo harassment. If you find yourself in a situation like this, please do not hesitate to report it to your direct supervisor, department director, and/or the HR department. Located here is what the acknowledgement looks like that you will be receiving and signing. It states, I attended Goodwill Industries of the Inland Northwest Sexual Harassment Awareness Training for employees without supervisory duties. I understand that the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or the EEOC, defines sexual harassment as unwelcome sexual advances, requests for sexual favors, and other verbal or physical conduct of a sexual nature constitutes sexual harassment. When submission to such conduct is made either explicitly or implicitly a term or condition of individual's employment, submission or rejection of such conduct by an individual is used as a basis for employment decisions affecting such individuals, or such conduct has a purpose or effect of unreasonably interfering with the individual's work performance or creating an intimidating, hostile, or offensive working environment. I understand that Goodwill is an equal opportunity employer who believes that all employees have the right to work in an environment free from all forms of discrimination and harassment. I understand that discrimination and harassment based on sex, race, color, creed, age, marital status, family status, handicap, disability, religion, national origin, sexual orientation, veteran status, or upon the use of a trained dog guide or service animal by a disabled person or upon any other lawfully protected status is a violation of company policy, is strictly prohibited, and it will not be tolerated. I understand that any form of retaliation, including but not limited to derogatory comments against any individual making discrimination or harassment complaints, witnesses, or any other involved employees, is against Goodwill policy, is strictly prohibited, and will not be tolerated. I understand that Goodwill has a zero-tolerance policy pertaining to sexual harassment, any form of discrimination in the workplace, and retaliation, and that my engagement in said behaviors could subject me to disciplinary action up to and including discharge. I also understand that I can be held personally liable for my actions under United States law. I agree to take seriously and immediately report all witnessed or reported incidences of sexual harassment, discrimination, or retaliation that come to my attention. Again, thanks for your attention today. Please make sure if you have any questions, you either ask your direct supervisor or contact the Human Resource Department. After all those questions have been answered, or if you have no questions, you will receive the acknowledgement that we just went through. You will be required to print your name at the top, sign it at the bottom, and date it. This acknowledgement should be sent to the Human Resource Department for your personnel file. This acknowledgement is good for 1 year. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you.